This is the Editor's Half Hour. Step into the life of an editor for 30 minutes as we discuss the craft of editing, industry trends, and editorial resources. Your host is co-founder and CEO of Peak Publishing Inc., Nadia Jaja Pupa. She is experienced in all facets of the publishing industry, from editing to design, and works with corporate clients and self-published authors. Nadia and her guests are about to share powerful insights and stories on what it takes to be an editor. And this is your host, Nadia Jaja Pupa.
Welcome, listeners, to the Editor's Half Hour. I have a special episode today. I can't wait to get into the topic of AI and ethics. But before we do that, I want to just, give a little shout out to a few products that I've been working on and I'm so excited about. At this point, you've probably heard about the editor's calendar that I'm holding up right now, the 2025 inaugural editor's calendar. I partnered with the lovely Katira Poland. So stay tuned for more updates from the two of us. But also, we have a special interview with Katira that I have been playing at the end of every episode. And so she'll share some of her ideas and thoughts about the calendar and why we did it. But it's not too late. It's by the time this episode is out, it'll be February 1st. So it's not too late to purchase your calendar. And, just some side notes about it is that it's our way of building our editorial community and supporting each other. And so check it out. It's really great. Our month of January, we featured Erin, and she was also on the podcast. And it's lovely to be able to support each other. Also, don't forget about the affirmation cards for editors. These are still a thing. I'm seeing people post online. So join the movement. And I would love to see more editors just giving themselves that boost that they need. And last, I want to also remind you to sign up for my newsletter. I'll have links for that in the show notes. And consider joining my Patreon to support the podcast. For just the cost of a cup of coffee, I think it's $5 a month, you can support my efforts in this podcast by really sharing information for other editors, what's relevant and what's happening. So I want to just thank you again for being my supporters and check out all of these awesome things that are happening and that I'm doing and that I'm involved in. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get started. I would love to welcome the wonderful, fabulous Amy Froschauer Kelly. Welcome, Amy. I am so happy you're here. I want to just share a little bit about how we met. And I believe it was the AI for Editors class with Aaron Survey. Is that correct? Yeah, that's how we met. And we really connected there. And since then, and that was I want to say a couple years ago, you've been doing a lot with AI. You've been involved speaking. You've been working with Aaron on a variety of things. So we're going to talk about that. So please introduce yourself. Tell the listeners what you're working on right now and how you got into this AI space. It's a great story.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I'm very glad to be talking to you again because you're pretty awesome. So, I'm an editor, and I have been for my entire adult career. And most of my work, I have done some fun stuff, some adventures at kind of big entertainment companies, but for the most part, I've done journalism and technical editing, finance, content marketing type stuff. So more dry, but also more involved with facts and accountability. So
Yes.
I'm going to tell you a little tiny story. I'll make it really fast, I promise. So November 30th, 2022, my daughter's birthday, that's how I know, ChatGPT was unleashed upon the public.
Yes, it was.
I was like, hey, this is fun. I was playing with it because I am a very techie person. I'm a geek. And I was hearing reports of kids using it to do their homework. I thought, ugh, that's so silly. And then January, a little piece of copy came across my desk, and I was reading it, and I had three thoughts. The first one was, wow, this guy can suddenly write a lot better.
No way.
The second was that this has got to be plagiarized. He did not write
Oh
this.
my God.
And the third, and this is all like within a couple of minutes of looking at it, was
Okay.
that the third idea was this is this is so formulaic. Could he be using ChatGPT?
No.
Yeah. So my director and I confronted him. He said, no, never, would not. And there was a power imbalance because it was a very, very large company I was working at. And
Okay.
he was senior, and I was just this editor, and my director, we were not as high up in the hierarchy. So we were going to have to leave it at that. And I thought, you know what? I'll do what I would do to my kid. I said, it's too bad that you didn't use it because, it's such a new technology and we don't have any rules about it. It would be wonderful to hear what people are doing to be innovative about it. Gosh, I'm so disappointed. And he's like, oh yeah, I did it.
Oh my God. Genius, Amy.
He
So
fell
so
for
then
it.
what? So then what?
Well, then we talked about it a little bit, and he promised never ever to do it again. So he did it again. And that was when, I mean, can you believe this?
So great. Well, then what
So,
happened? Yeah.
well, what happened was I went to my director and I said,
Okay.
hey, there are policies for certain codes of ethics for all kinds of things in our industry. There are codes of ethics for journalists, all that stuff. We need to have a policy for AI use. And he said, that's a fantastic idea. You're doing it.
Good.
I don't want to have anything to do with it.
That's great.
So that's how in January of 2023, less than 2 months after ChatGPT came on board, I wrote what is, as far as we know, the very first AI content policy in the
Wow.
financial industry. And yeah, and it's been an interesting ride since then because
Mhm.
people, it's very polarizing,
It is. It is. It
So
is.
I have people talking to me and loathing me for having acknowledged that this could be a tool that is useful. And then I have people who say, how can you take a stand that you don't make recommendations, you're not cheerleading for it? Why aren't you? This is such an important thing. Why aren't you working harder on it? I'm like, well, I mean, if it's ethics, I want to maintain some sort of balance and
Yeah.
impartiality. So
Right.
anyway, so for the last 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, I've been a full-time AI content policy teacher, presenter, advocate, and AI guest lecturer. And I've had a lot of opportunities. I've talked for the American Society of Journalists and Editors, for
Awesome.
ACES, the American, the Society for Editing, Bay Area Editors Forum, Editorial Freelancers Association, Association of Accounting Marketers. It's been all over the map, and it's
Wow.
great. There's wonderful people who are really genuinely curious.
Yeah. And I hope that that's what our listeners are. And I know that it is very polarizing and you can't really escape that. I mean, really polarizing. I mean, very, very anti. And then there's some that are
Yeah.
just using AI to actually write their books, which I think is that's a little taking it a little too far. And so I think that we need to really discuss today why that polarization exists. What are the general attitudes surrounding I know that you've also done you're working on a survey because I participated in the survey. As soon as I saw you post about it, I
Thank
think
you.
you posted it on LinkedIn and I thought, "Oh my God, I gotta be a part of this," because
Thank
I have the
you.
whole title here. Amy posted something called the 2024, and we can talk a little bit about it. The
It's a
survey
long
of
title.
generative AI, artificial intelligence usage, attitudes, ethics, and practical concerns among editors and related professionals. And there
Yeah.
are concerns. There really, really are. There's a lot we're going to talk about in terms of what editors and how editors are feeling about it and how it's being used. But why don't we start with the survey a little bit and tell us what your intentions are with this and what you plan to do and where you're at.
Well, um, my intentions, my intentions are to do a 3-year study on the attitudes, usage, and everything else in the title for US editors, but we ended up having editors from other nations contribute, which is cool and
Very
fine.
cool.
So I want to know how they're using it. I want to know how their perceptions are changing, how their usage is changing, how their experiences and opinions of other of clients and of other editors, of authors, how are those changing? How are we going to track what's going on, how people are shifting their attitudes? And the results are in. They're still being reviewed by one person who is, you should never ever arrange for an academic person to be reviewing material in December.
Oh
That was,
no. Oh
that's
no.
on me.
No.
But I look forward to publishing it soon and telling you all about it. So bring me back on
I'll
that.
come back on the podcast. We
Yeah.
got it. Yeah, I really am so interested. And it's not just me. So many people must be interested to hear about what other editors are saying and doing because this really directly affects what we do. And so just recently in recent news, um let's do it,
I
Amy.
know
Let's
what you're,
talk.
I know what
You
you're,
know where I'm gonna.
I do. I do.
I'm just gonna say it. We're gonna talk about Elsevier. This is not the first mass resignation that they've had, and there was a recent one. I don't have the specific journal title up right now, but a big
Journal
group
of
of
Human
editors.
Evolution.
Yes, okay. The Journal of Human
Yeah.
Evolution, a big wave of resignations. They have posted a statement, a resignation statement online. I read that. You know what, Amy? You go for it. I want to hear your thoughts. What's going on in your brain?
My brain is blowing up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So Elsevier is, for people who don't know about it, Elsevier is a mass publishing company for medical journals, scientific journals, and also kind of the pay-to-play journals that are the peer review process is pretty much non-existent for the pay-to-play, which is my term and not anybody else's. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the the information that they've given is not good. It just means that they didn't go through a whole peer review process. So, regarding that, Elsevier has had problems. And this is true of a lot of different academic publishers and, again, medical science, etc., because there is such a huge influx of papers that are submitted. There are fewer and fewer peer reviewers who are available, and this is because peer reviewers generally don't get paid.
And I think what was upsetting for the editors, the staff, was the use of AI. and how AI was then being used, from what I gathered, production and editorial, like copy editing, and it caused problems there.
Well, you're not wrong. So, so with this particular journal, most of these journals actually work somewhat independently. They do their own thing, and then they come under the Elsevier umbrella, which actually does the financial backing and publishing. So they've been having problems for a long time. And so it doesn't all involve AI. There were other problems involved, regarding funding, regarding removing staff because it was not financially advantageous. So they already had a lot of good reason to resign, but the AI stuff was that was just it.
Yeah.
So actually, all but one of the members of the editorial board of Journal of Human Evolution resigned, and this was in protest. And I believe that you actually had shared the PDF of their
Mm-hmm.
their whole. It's just 2 pages, really well written about what was going on and the
Yeah.
whole timeline. Okay, so Elsevier has problems going back quite a while for many reasons, a lot of which have to do with the peer review process and the lack of editorial oversight. So, up until about a year ago, I may have it may not be exactly a year, but around then, they had no real AI policy in place. So, no guidelines or anything. It was basically just don't do it. That was what it
Okay.
was. However, it's such a powerful tool for people. It's there, it's accessible. So people are using it. They were using it anyway. And because of that, peer reviewed papers would get published that had errors. I don't know whether I'm allowed to bring up the rat with the
Yeah, you can.
unusual genitalia. I don't know if that's something that's okay to talk about, but
It is because it's public knowledge. So that's
okay.
pretty embarrassing. That was very embarrassing that happened. And I can
Yeah,
put links in. I'd like to put in links in the show notes as well. So if there are listeners that are like, "What are they talking about?" There's some embarrassing stuff that Elsevier has done, and it's like, really. So I will put those articles in there so you can get caught up. But go ahead. I didn't mean
yeah.
to
So,
interrupt.
well, so in response to this, and the rat came a while after that, but in response to finding errors in uh, diagrams and charts with numbers, and finding illustrations that had been created by AI and did not have any kind of credit, and they also had weird captions because AI is not good. Image generation for AI is very poor at generating words, actual words. They just
Yeah.
look like
Mm-hmm.
gobbledygook.
Mm-hmm.
So they took it on a case-by-case basis rather than developing some sort of guideline or some sort of guardrail. And that became an issue because remember that Elsevier works with over 100 publishers, over 100 journals. And these journals oftentimes had their own policy. And so they'd have to meet 2 different standards. And the Elsevier policy, up until very recently, for editors and for writers, was buried among all these other editorial policies and authorial policies, and you couldn't find it. So if you got caught doing something that was okay according to your standards, Elsevier could retract your paper and ruin your career. Now that's one part of the puzzle. That's one of the things that went wrong and really should have been changed earlier. The other piece is the general problem with having enough editors, human editors in the first place, because they're getting rid of copy editors who are the people who will actually be going through and checking for factual information. They're verifying things. They're going through all of these numbers. Tedious job, takes a long time, means a lot of money to be spent on them, but it's worth it because there are things that humans are going to pick up that these programs will not. But they didn't have them. They did not have them,
I
and
see.
so oftentimes these are things that came up in published works, published papers that had been through the reviews by the authors. They had been reviewed by peer reviews, and then they had gone through the editorial staff, and there were still problems. They were still showing up. So that is where Elsevier was really messing up. They've changed some stuff around, but because of that, they've had really, really hilarious problems that aren't so hilarious if you actually work there. And it's been the straw that broke the camel's back for this particular group of editors, an actual full editorial board.
Wow.
And that's terrible.
It
It's
is
terrible for
terrible.
the
It's
industry. It's terrible for the reputation of the journal. It's terrible for the people who contribute to it.
so this is getting into that. What is that policy? So we're talking right now about how AI has failed us as a society. There are failures out there, and that's what we're talking about. So, in that sense of failure, who is held accountable? And I feel like that where that AI policy comes into play. So, in the sense of Elsevier, like, who is held accountable when something fails? You can't fire software. Microsoft Word has failed me sometimes. It's crashed on me. That's a different situation. So we're talking generative AI failures. Who, in your opinion, Amy, who is held accountable in those situations? The company? The Who's that gatekeeper? Is there a gatekeeper?
If you have a policy, then you have that in place. You have some
Okay.
sort of oversight and governance that tells you what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, how, when, and who is going to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to your question of who's held accountable, all of these policies from Elsevier that I have read, I have not read over 100 of them, but all of the ones that I've read maintain that the person responsible is the author. And that would be true for other errors, non-AI related errors. So that tracks, but this has added another layer of responsibility because if you're using AI to format citations, that's something where that has to be disclosed. And any type of usage really ought to they ought to keep track of those things. And it's hard to be accountable for something like that if you don't have the rules and if the rules change depending on who you're writing for. So there are not industry standards.
So, Amy, we're talking about, and I phrased it as AI failures, but what does that really mean? Can you explain a little bit when I'm saying AI is failing us, in your with your insight, what does that really mean?
Well, I could say that it's like a tool that fails. Like if you have a typewriter and the keys get stuck, that's a failure of the typewriter. And it's also a failure of whoever wasn't keeping the typewriter up. With AI failures, AI can do some really dumb things. However, I mean, we know that. But
Yeah,
but they're human failures as well, because there is the concept of human in the loop.
I see.
So when when you have something, when you've created something, you've written an outline using ChatGPT or whatever else you're using. You've put in a prompt for that, you put in all the information, it gives you something back, it gives you an output. Now, what are you doing with that? Is the human being actually staying in the loop, evaluating the output, making decisions about whether it should be changed, whether they should reinitiate the whole conversational thread? Who's responsible for that? The human being is the operator of the machine, and the machine in this case is not a typewriter because it can generate stuff itself. It's more like a, I don't know, a player piano. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm bad at analogies,
I
but
get where you're going with this though. And
yeah,
I do. And I see what you're saying. And it's making me think about when I visited your website, I looked at resources and it made me think of the resource that you had listed written by Olivia Gamblin, that book
yeah,
title Responsible AI. And even in the
yeah.
book description, I haven't read the book yet. I'd like to someday, but even in her book description, she identifies these three print core pillars, and you said it just
Hmm.
now, and one of those is people, process, and technology, and how to stay
Yeah.
responsible in those.
It's more geared toward business leadership.
Okay.
So the way that she frames those particular core pillars that you were talking about, the people, the process, the technology, that's what she calls the canvas that all of this is painted upon. So with people, she's really talking about the culture of the organization. She's talking about their mission, their values, and how they're trained. For process, they're talking about structure, how it's used, how it's what they use, how they use it, and how they implement it. Then there's technology, which is the way that she puts it. The technology is actually measuring the outcome, whether or not the tool is appropriate or is used appropriately and is going to yield useful, measurable results. It's a great, great resource. And I would also recommend Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence
Okay.
and the AI snake oil I have up there.
Oh, great.
I have a few.
I want, and listeners, visit Amy's website because you list a lot of great resources, which I really appreciate. And I think that these resources are important for a specific type of editor, not an editor who's running a corporation, but an editor who may work full time. Maybe you're director level. Maybe you're at a point where you've been approached by executive staff to put an, like you had, Amy, in your exact story. Hey, let's put a policy together. And so you can say no, or you can say you can accept the challenge like Amy did and do your research and figure out a way to put a policy together. Or you could call Amy up and say, hey, Amy, we're going to hire you as a consultant to do it. I mean, there's stuff happening, and it's one of those things where I think as editors, the astute editor will do some research and see what's out there, read some books, and understand what should go in AI policy and how to write that. um
And I teach a class in it too.
I was gonna say, Amy can teach a class. I mean, there's a lot
I
out
have one.
there,
Yeah.
and so I just don't want editors to feel that they're alone when they're approached with this topic. And it is coming up. Executive leadership is saying, how can we introduce AI into our process? I'm of the standing that you can use it as that tool to help move things along, help speed things up. Um, Personally, in my business, I am not using it to create content. I'm using it to help with my processes. And one of those is ghostwriting. So I think that by having the AI note taker record sessions with, it's really just me having a conversation with the author. All of the content is coming from the author's mouth. It is being captured by AI, who then the whatever system or service I'm using will then send me that transcript, which is then used for drafting chapters of the book. And so that's AI right then and there being used as a tool. Other examples that I'm using it right now is for AI image enhancement. AI using the existing pixels and images that look really crappy and just cleaning it up and using that to really enhance images that were taken in on old cell phones or really low res images that need to be enhanced. So again, those are examples though as a tool, not really creating anything, it's enhancing things and making things easier. And I think it's worth sharing that. But now I'm also a business owner too. I'm an editor. I'm a full-time staffer in my own corporation. However, in your position, Amy, looking at Peak Publishing, do you think that I should have a statement or a policy in place that addresses how I'm using it for image enhancement? Do I need to do something as a company to say, hey, she's using it in ghostwriting sessions? I mean, that's where I'm like, how do we then go to that next step?
Having something in place, some sort of statement or policy, that is something that you can have as a public-facing document. You could have it be something that you just speak with your clients on. Just say to your ghostwriting client,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is what I'm using. This is why. How do you feel about it? Are you okay with it? Sign something to make sure that we are on the same page, literally, for what we're doing.
Right. And that's
And
what
then
I've
there's
done.
also,
Yeah, but
well,
that's it so far.
perfect.
So,
You're
yeah.
you're already there. See? But you
But
can also have an internal document
mhm.
to assure yourself that the same tools are being used throughout, that there's no sort of weird
Mm,
repetition. There's no redundancy there. That people are using it in the same way. So
okay.
so say, okay, it's great. Everyone can use it for these things in this manner. For these things, think about it and then come for approval to use it. And then for these things, no way.
Okay.
So that's something that could be useful to you, and it could also specify the type of tool. And then also it's just really important to have disclosure.
Okay.
So like if it's an original photo that's been lightly edited, would you disclose that it had been put through some filters on your phone?
Mm,
I mean,
I don't
that's
know.
kind of hazy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're just enhancing and not really changing. As for other things, with the ghostwriting, um, it's a part of the process, but unless you're using it to rewrite things, I don't think that it's really, that's something you've got to talk about with your client and make decisions together. But
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds to me like you're doing everything right,
Well, that's good to
which
hear.
I'm glad to be able to say that.
Great. Oh, that makes me happy. And I felt like I was, and I'm there's always that full transparency with the client when they see that I have my AI note taker attending the Zoom meetings. And
Hmm.
so that's just a few examples, and that's really all I'm using it right now. But there are other companies that are using it to generate content, and then they manipulate it, and they're actually making those practical uses. But I think the issues though, and you just said it, and I love that you said it, and I want to reiterate this, which is being on the same page, whether it's with the client and the business owner or the executive staff and the full-time employees, where they're all on the same page. And so I want to learn a little bit more about your experiences as a consultant, Amy. What have you witnessed, without revealing any names, any businesses, but just what have you witnessed? What are the general attitudes surrounding this? When you walk in, are people, no, this is ridiculous, and there's a crowd that's like, yay, let's use AI? I mean, what are you walking into?
Kind of the middle. If I'm walking into it, it's because they recognize that there's a need. So, uh, individuals and the team may be more or less excited about it, but I think that if it's going to be used in an organization, then I don't think that you can go wrong by having a set of guidelines or by just having some sort of plan, because things are going to go wrong. Things are
Hmm.
going to go wrong the same way that they're going to go wrong with that typewriter eventually. So, how do you deal with it? Plan ahead. What's
I
going to
like
go
that.
wrong? What's going to go right that you have to meet with? So, the people who I encounter who are on that sort of mindset, I find are very, very good to work with because
Okay.
they are clear about that.
I like that. This is great. And I love that we talked a little bit about, some resources. We talked about what's the dark side of AI. We're talking about the positive side of AI, things that we can systems that we can put in place and also how to safeguard ourselves. But now let's turn it back to the editor. After all, it is the editor's half hour. What are some words of encouragement? What are some ideas that you have, your personal opinions on the future outlook, um, and just some general words of advice for the editor who is struggling with this topic. They're the ones who are so polar. We're addressing the polarization right now, and the ones who
Mhm.
recoil at the topic. No, no, don't talk about AI. What are your, what is your insight here?
My insight is that people are all over the place, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
I think I probably said something like this before, but the attitudes vary, and they have evolved a great deal over the last 2 years because we've kind of gone from, and I believe I said this before, I'm not sure. We've gone from kind of a crisis of uncertainty where nobody knew what was going on. No one knew how to use the tools. No one knew who else was using them. Were we all going to lose our jobs? It's scary, but we're all in this together, and we need to
Hmm.
work on that. So we've moved from that because we did all do it together
Hmm.
to a kind of cautious acknowledgement at worst. So for the most part, they understand that it's there, they acknowledge that, and I will point out that having some sort of set of rules doesn't mean that you just say, "Oh, this is what it's okay for and this isn't." You can also just say, "I understand that this technology is there. I understand how it works. I understand the advantages and disadvantages, and I have made an informed decision that I'm not going to be using it."
I love that.
That is totally cool.
That is so well said.
Thank you. There's one particular writer who has something very, very similar to that inspired that in me. I'm not going to take credit for that. Um, but the attitudes have varied, and I think that, like my own uh, first reaction, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I thought, as I said earlier, I thought, wow, this guy got better. Oh my God, it's plagiarism. Whoa, could this be AI?
Right.
And like on a personal level, I was so betrayed
Mm.
and disappointed and angry and resentful. And I think that most of us can relate to that, whether or not we've had that experience. We've certainly experienced these feelings. And that's part of why the attitudes have changed and evolved.
I truly appreciate hearing that, especially coming from you. And you are coming in, I see you as coming in at a neutral standpoint where you're not shaming anybody for being anti-AI. You're acknowledging the fact that that's a natural and normal response, but then you're also coming in very level-headed and addressing concerns that may arise, especially from a business perspective, and how to safeguard the business against what can and cannot happen with AI. And so it's very realistic. And I love your approach and I love your message. So I really, really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I can't thank you enough. Last question is, where can listeners find you? What is the best way for them to reach out to you if they have questions? Where are you speaking next? Give us everything. We want to know.
Okay. Um, Find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me because I'm terrible with Instagram and Threads and all that stuff. I just I'm not good at posting there. LinkedIn is a great place to find me. In February, I'm going to be on the Editor's Half Hour, so you can watch me there. And also in February, I'm going to be speaking for the Chartered Institute for Editing and Proofreading, which is CIEP, which is the
Excellent.
UK equivalent of ACES or
ACES.
EFA.
Excellent. And are you
Yeah.
going to be in Salt Lake City this year for ACES?
Oh yeah. Oh
Excellent.
yeah. And full disclosure, I'm a member of the board of ACES. I probably should have mentioned that before, but yeah.
It's okay.
So
Yes, you're a board
I
member. I'll see you there. I will look for you and give
I
you a
can't
big
wait.
hug. I know, I can't wait. I'm so excited to see you and so many other lovely editors. So thank you again, Amy. This was such a wonderful interview, and I really, really appreciate all of the information you shared today.
Thank you. I love everything that you do. I love my affirmation cards.
Thank you. Hey listeners, don't go away just yet. We have a really quick announcement to make. I have Katira here. We have partnered on a really exciting thing, which is the 2025 Editor's Calendar. I'd like to hand it over to Katira to share some information about why we're doing this and the exciting news.
Yes, thank you so much, Nadia. And yes, I had this idea a few years ago, actually, and just never acted on it. But I wanted to create a calendar to bring editors to the forefront. We all know we do lots of work behind the scenes that sometimes goes unrecognized. So I wanted to create opportunity for people to see the people behind the book magic that is out there. So I'm super excited to collaborate with Nadia. And Nadia, of course, has created the editing affirmation cards. And I saw the graphic design on those and decided I wanted her to help me with my calendar. So that is why I specifically tapped Nadia. And I'm excited that all of our spots are full for the calendar already. And excited to see so many the powerful and prominent and successful and also down-to-earth editors who have signed up to
Yes.
join the calendar. So
Yes.
thank you, Nadia, for your support and collaborating with me. If you're interested in purchasing the 2025 Editor's Calendar, feel free to email me at Poland, that's POLLAND, at love4words.com. And I'll be happy to get you signed up to get your copy. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Editor's Half Hour. This podcast is your go-to resource for editorial trends, opening the discussion for new ideas through the real-life stories of editors. For more information about Nadia Jaja Pupa and her business, visit peakpublishing.com. That's PIQUE publishing.com. And remember to subscribe and follow the Editor's Half Hour wherever you get your podcasts.